She's the former. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yes, okay, thank you. So we're recording the meeting now. We're honored to have our guest speaker today. She's the former district attorney of the 25th Judicial District of Texas. Her name is Heather McMinn, and during her time as a DA, she served as the highest ranking law enforcement officer in the 25th Judicial District. She was responsible for prosecuting all felony cases in Guadalupe County, which included presenting cases to a grand jury and litigating during jury trials. She also trained law enforcement officers and provided legal assistance to the sheriff's department and the police departments in the district. She's currently a felony trial attorney in Guadalupe County, and she performs pro bono work for families seeking to adopt. And today she'll share some of her experiences working as the district attorney during her time working as a district attorney for Guadalupe County. And Heather, do we have your permission to record today's session?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Heather McMinn. Thank you so much.
Do you still go by Waller? You still go by Waller? Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. At any time, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to interrupt. In the line of getting to know each other, if you have your social meeting, I'd like to discuss one of your members, Ms. Waller. I believe she's the person who put my name in the bin to come speak today. She was my librarian in 7th grade. Oh. And what she may not know, I still remember her, and there was another teacher, Ms. Stockstill, who were very influential in my life. I was an avid reader, and I moved to Marion, Texas in 1987 with my father, who was military. It was a very small school. There were 69 people in my graduating class when we graduated in 93. But when I moved there, I was a very awkward person. My father had been on a lot of 6-month assignments. We had come from Spain, Australia. We lived in Hawaii. I missed a lot of school. And I also was raised by an abusive mother. And that was very isolating. But one gift that I had was that I loved to read. And when I came to Marion, I was a little bit lonely because I had just moved there. These guys had all gone to school since kindergarten. And I remember kind of gravitating towards the library. And Miss Waller, I don't know if you remember this, you gave me an assignment when you noticed that I was always coming in there. And you indicated that I like to read. And I said, yes. And you said, well, if you want to help me out, you can read the new books when they come in and tell me about them. I don't think she needed me to do that because she knew darn well what she was ordering. But she started assigning me books, and my father had been very strict. I didn't read like romances or those type of books. He was a little bit strict on what I was reading. A lot of historical fiction and a lot of just really intense novels. And I remember the first book that came in because it was a new box. And I remember going to the library, which I could go and have lunch there because I would eat by myself sometimes. And I would go into the library, and I remember opening the box and getting to pick. It was a book called Breaker Boys that I actually got to, and I remember it to this day. I actually bought a copy of it, and Miss Waller had me read that. So that really helped instill part of my love for reading, and part that kind of helped pivot me into becoming an attorney. Being able to read, and I read ferociously. And I remember at one point she gave me the book Merlin, and I think that book was like this thick. And it was and I was like, I can never read that. I was also a runner, and I did very well at running, and I would read that book sitting at track meets all day, and it took me almost the whole season to get through the book, but it really got me interested in a lot of that line of reading, which helped in law school because we had lots of very thick books. It also really gave me a respect for writers. I really do. I have a lot of respect for all of you. It's a hard field. I, at one point, was told by a professor as I was having him go over one of my writings, and he said, oh, it was Miller at the time. He said, Miss Miller, you write like you speak. And I said, thank you. And he said, that's not a compliment. So it's hard. It's hard to write in such a way that you can actually be entertaining, engaging, and have good style and good form. So thank you guys for what you do, because I actually still read a lot of criminal type books, a lot of mysteries, a lot of those type of novels, now more so on audio, listen to a lot of books, but thank you for what you do. I'd like to begin by sharing with you. So I started my career as an attorney in 2001, and I'm from Marion area, which is a small town outside of San Antonio. It's located in between I-35 and I-10. I went back and began prosecuting in the county attorney's office, and the county attorney in Texas at that time was responsible for misdemeanor only cases and juvenile cases. So I started prosecuting misdemeanors and juveniles, and I did that for about 2 years. And then I went into private practice and I worked as a criminal defense attorney. After a few years, I decided that I would be better serve my community if I ran for office. And I thought that I wanted to be a judge. I was young and ambitious. I was ignorant of my own ignorance and life experience. And I was talking to another attorney and I said, man, I just want to put people in jail. And she said, you need to be the DA. And so I actually ran for district attorney. I ran against an incumbent. It was a ferocious race. Any of you that are writing about political mysteries, if you ever have any questions, have my email. Politics is nasty. It's nasty and it's hard. So I had 2 children while right before I ran. So I drug my children around South Texas and campaigned and started working in the criminal courts. I was very careful not to use my children in any of my advertisements or media. I have one picture, one flyer that was done where I have my children are visible, but it's from the back only. You will find that as a prosecutor or even a defense attorney that you do become a target, that your personal stuff now, so more than ever, there's so much personal information out there that you can become a target. And so I was very careful with that. And that's something just to be cognizant of, if you're writing in that area, or if you ever dealing with politics, a lot of times the privacy of the families, the work that it is for families being involved with that. So I started in 2009. I was sworn in on January 1st at 9 a.m. And my very first case out the door was a case in Gonzales County. It's called the Ramirez case. It can be Googled. Sonny Little is an author. He has done a couple criminal books in that genre. And he was there for the Gonzales, I think it was the Inquirer at the time. That was a very sad story. And I actually sent that out. I was like, hey, would you like me to talk about this? And I think the response was, that's a little heavy. And it was a child starvation case. There was 2 little girls that were kept by their adoptive biological aunt and uncle. And they were, one was beaten very severely. The other, they were beaten and starved. That was my first trial back in 2009. That case, there's also a documentary on it called Little Angels that is out. It was a very hard and trying case. Has you wrestle with some of the things that you guys might, in your mind, if you're writing in that genre, it's the good and the evil. And it was truly an experience. And I'd been practicing for some time and I'd seen quite a bit, but it was truly an experience of evil does exist in our society. And my co-counsel in that particular case was Carrie Moy at the time. And she said, people ask how other people can do such things to each other. And she said, the only answer that I have is that evil exists. And she actually was very dramatic because she pointed and said, it's sitting right there. And I have found that in the criminal justice system, there are people that are evil. It is a tangible thing. You can feel it. You can see it. And you see the ramifications and the destruction that such evil does cause. So some of those types of novels, if you are writing in that line, you can't make the stuff up. I mean, there are such bad things that happen and people perpetrate on each other, what they do to children, what they do to other people. It's very sad and scary. So there's a lot of information out there on that. On the lighter side, the majority of the people that we prosecute are just people that make mistakes. Drug addicts, the criminal justice system, and it deals a lot with drug addicts and mental health. We have a lot of people where mental health issues and problems have then become criminalized because they in fact don't have the resources that are necessary, or we have no way of making people get help for their mental health, which they can be physically violent and very dangerous individuals who have very valid mental health issues, and the facilities that we have are very limited. So a lot of times these people end up becoming part of the criminal justice system, which is a very terrible place for them to be. In some areas, we have some very good, I know Bluebonnet Trails, and there's some very good things in South Texas now working on jail diversion programs and to help the mental health. So there's a lot of different things, but most of the people that we deal with in the criminal justice system are people that have just made some mistakes. And you'll see that, Travis, and it's different. And what I have found very interesting working as both a defense attorney and a prosecutor is that the differences that you get in different counties. From what a system will be. They used to tease in Williamson County, if you are driving on I-35, you better pull over and bury your weed before you get to Williamson County. And so that was kind of a big joke. So you have different things. Comal County now is pretty tense. You can see different things for a lot of the stupid kind of crimes that you would see. The less serious, non-physical violent, they're still serious as to what the punishment ranges are. But I look at things more if you hurt somebody, whether that's physically, hurting someone and having a true victim versus a person that is consuming drugs and alcohol and then being dangerous to society. I do think that there's a difference in those kind of crimes. But you can see the way our state is, we don't have uniform sentencing guidelines. There's an extreme amount of discretion. Law enforcement officers have a lot of discretion to determine if they are going to arrest or not. Once we get they arrest, they send the cases to the district or county attorney's office. There's an extreme amount of discretion to determine what you're going to charge, when you're going to charge it, and then once it's indicted, then what that punishment will be or how you're going to resolve that case. In Texas, we have the misdemeanor cases, which are cases that are punishable. Class Cs are tickets. Those can be handled in JP courts, municipality courts, small time traffic violations. Then you have Class B misdemeanors, Class A misdemeanors. Those are punishable by up to the Class Bs. Those are things that you can go to jail for. Those are your county cases. You're going to county jail, like your DWIs. Those type of criminal trespass, different lower level crimes. Those can be charged in DWI first, DWI seconds, or Class A's. And there's some different variances, but it's normally a less serious offense. The maximum that you can ever get on those is a year in county jail, which is generally probated, and up to a $4,000 fine. The office that I work in now actually has jurisdiction of both misdemeanors and of felonies. Felonies are cases, and the misdemeanor cases, the discretion on whether a file or not comes from the office itself, and they can just sign an information, and which brings the charges forward. All felonies have to go before a grand jury. Different counties, different courts, they have different, depending on your population and the number of cases, grand juries can meet at different times. I think all of you in this group would thoroughly enjoy getting to sit on a grand jury, because the prosecuting attorney will present all cases to you, and the grand jury gets to decide if they're going to no bill, which means not go forward with charges, or if they are going to sign an indictment against a person. And all felony cases, they're starting with your state jail felonies all the way up to capital murder, have to be presented to the grand jury. A vote of 9 by a grand jury in the state of Texas will be a true bill against the person, and they will be indicted. Once indicted, then they'll be called before the district courts. So there's a lot of discretion with your prosecutors as to how they're going to handle a case and what they're going to do with the case. Once the case gets filed, then you're more in control of whatever judge you're in front of, like where the case is at, your timelines and those type of things. So yes, sir.
Grand jury is 12 people, is that right?
There's normally 12 people there, but you need 9 votes to do a true bill. So we normally have 12 individuals present and when we're presenting the case, and we need 9 votes to true bill. If we have 10 people there, you can still go forward. As long as you have 9, you can even go forward with 9, but your cases better be really good because you have to get those votes in order to get your indictment. So legally you can go forward with 9. But generally when you get called in, we start attendance is normally 12. That's who's impaneled. Grand juries in my county, I actually present cases to grand jury. I started doing that when I was the elected because I wanted to see what my prosecutors, every single case that came through the office, because I had my name on it. I wanted to see what they were. I do those for my county attorney now, who's the elected, is Dave Wilborn. So I generally present to grand jury still. And it's really interesting because the grand jury process, first of all, everything that's presented is confidential, and they make the determination as to whether or not the case is going to be filed, but they can also do investigations. They can say, hey, you know what? I think that the mayor is stealing and we want that investigated. And then we have subpoena power based on what they ask us to investigate. We also pre-grand jury will issue a lot of subpoenas on behalf of the grand jury for things like medical records or for phone records or for different types of records in order to do that. We can also pull witnesses in and have live witnesses testify and answer questions before the grand jury. Does anyone have questions about the grand jury? Yes, sir.
So grand jury, you presenting this evidence to bring somebody to trial could go on for months, meeting with these same 12 people, basically?
Our grand jury, we have June and July, and it normally goes on for you have 6 months of service. And that during that time, I mean, they can meet every day. Ours meets the first Thursday. And so it's a little bit different than some of the bigger counties where if you have grand jury service, you're on for a specific period of time. And that grand jury will hear all the cases for that time. Bigger counties have multiple grand jurors going at the same time. So, but my personal experience is in the smaller jurisdiction. And the importance of the grand jury, like if you have someone that gets arrested, even on a felony, even on a murder case. So if you're arrested on a murder case, the law enforcement and the district or county attorney's office, they've got 90 days to get an indictment returned if you are sitting in custody. If they don't return that indictment with 90 days, you're entitled to bond out. So sometimes there's a breakdown and cases don't get there before 90 days and the person gets to bond out of jail, even on very serious cases. So, you know, it's a very important process because in charging someone with a felony, that's a life-changing thing. I mean, you could potentially go to jail. The lowest levels, you've got your state jail felonies, but then you've got your second degrees, which are 2 to 10 years. You've got your your third degree is 2 to 10, your second degrees are 2 to 20, and then your first degree 5 to 99. And there's a big range there. Then you've got your murder and your capital murder. So with those big and capital murder, you can have, and then the death, capital murder punishable by the death penalty. Whether or not to seek the death penalty is another thing that the district attorney gets to make, that or county attorney that has felony jurisdiction gets to make that determination. If you are going to seek the death penalty in a case, you have to file a motion saying you affirmatively are going to do so. So there's a lot of power in the district attorney's office, and there's a lot of power there. There's a lot of responsibility, and it's a pretty busy job.
Have you had to do that?
I've had to make the decision. I've had cases that are death eligible, capital murder cases, and you get to the point in a lot of these cases where you have to make the determination is in a smaller county, is it financially worth it? One, it's very expensive. The state of Texas does allow for the death penalty in certain offenses, like if you kill a child under, I believe it's 6 years at this time. If you murder multiple people at the same time, if you kill a law enforcement officer, there's a bunch of different specific things that if you do these things that you are eligible for death. There have been several cases where I believe that death would be a suitable punishment. However, when taken into account the cost that it is to the county, the amount of time that the death penalty takes to actually be implemented. And some of my own personal reservations about not necessarily someone being punished by their death, but the way that the system is implemented. I believe that the way that the system is implemented is very challenging and doesn't necessarily provide some of the protections that it should. So, you know, it's very, if you look at the percentage of people that have actually been executed by the state of Texas, you'll find that there is the ratios of people of color, of people that are poor and indigent. Those are so much higher, people with mental health problems. And there are people that have done some truly horrific crimes, but you'll see that it's disproportionately implemented in the state. So the death penalty is as a whole nother thing. So I've never personally prosecuted. I have personally had capital murder cases where we've had life in prison. My daughter just walked in. She actually went to Sunday school with a little boy whose mama's boyfriend beat him to death when he was 5 years old. She was in pre-K, and they Mama's boyfriend had never had any kind of criminal issues before and lost it, and unfortunately picked JJ up by his feet and hit his head in between two cinder block walls and then stomped him to death. And that particular case, you know, we almost recused because I knew the child. His grandparents had taken him to church with him. But he pled guilty to life in prison. You know, he could have been subjected to the death penalty. But not only do you have to prove that they're death eligible under the capital offense, you also have to prove that they're going to be a future danger within the population to which they'll be confined. So they would have to show that they would be a danger in prison later. And so some of those cases, even you go through all the time and the money and the expense of getting a death sentence can often get reversed on appeal. And they take a long, long time. One of the things I was trying to think of what would be interesting when I would speak with y'all was some of the things that surprised me about the criminal justice system when I became the DA. That still kind of surprised me, and that I share with other people, and they're like, really? I thought when I came in, you know, especially working with families in death cases, I was going to be the good guy. I'm here to represent you. I'm going to get justice for you. I'm going to get justice. I'm going to make this. And what I realized very quickly is there's not a lot of justice because the wheels of justice move exceedingly slow. COVID did a real setback. That's part of the reason I'm back prosecuting is to get some of these cases that had sat and people waiting to get tried. But we also, it takes a very long time. And so families want things done quickly, and it's really hard to do that. The other thing is meeting with families who've lost a family victim to murder. I thought that they would be, you know, excited and happy to talk to me, but we're often the first person that they get to sit face to face with and ask questions and hold accountable. A lot of times they're very angry. And I was very offended at first. I was yelled at and screamed at. I had a case in Gonzales, and the victim, and all of this is public information and public record, but that young man, his name was Chet Ham. And he had just graduated from high school, and he was going off to college in the fall. And he was had everything going for him. He was working with his brother in the oil field, and they lived in South Austin, and they were working out in Gonzales, and they were traveling at 4:45 a.m. to go to work. And I had Chet, and I had a picture of him at graduation, and I had a picture of him at prom, and I had a picture of him at state tennis. His mom brought all this stuff in, and I'm like, I got you. I see him. She's like, no, this is my son. This is who I lost. And the father was there, and the father was a very, very big man, huge truck driver, almost got arrested at the scene. And he was very, very mad and angry, and come to find out their son on the way to work had gotten hit by a drunk driver. It was her 6th DWI. And it was horrible. And their car, his stepson, which was the half brother of Chet, was survived, and Chet did not. And his family was very angry. And every time I would meet with them, they'd be very angry at me. And because I couldn't get it done faster, because I couldn't get the death penalty, because we couldn't do these things. And you really dealing with those people, but you understand the emotions that they've gone through, because the one thing that the state can't do and what the justice system can't do is we can't bring people back, you know. And I say that to people, and not to be trite, but we can't bring people back from the dead, and that's what their parents want. That's what their mothers want. That's what brothers, sisters, cousins, friends, family, spouses, they want that, and we can't give them that. And I've said it before, and that we can't unrape people. This has happened. All we can do is fight for your family to get as much a punishment that you think is suitable. And so that was very hard and surprising for me, because I thought everyone's going to love me. I'm fighting for them. I'm trying these cases. I'm spending time away from my family, from my kids, and I'm doing these hard things, but they're angry. And then you realize, and then you get through the case, and you get to know these families, because we get to go to court. They show up like every 30 days. And by the end, I still keep in touch with a lot of the victims in my cases. They're thankful and they're happy. And it's like a cathartic thing, because we walk down this road with them. But the wheels of justice move very slow, and crime victims are hard to work with. And so that was a kind of an eye-opening for me, is like, not everyone was going to see me as Superman. I still get Christmas cards. The surviving sibling from my Ramirez case, and if anyone is interested in that, I'm sure you can get my email. She's actually started a nonprofit. She testified in court, and has, it's Crystal's Project is the name of her nonprofit, and she's done very, very well. And I keep in touch with her from 2009. So it's very interesting. You do form relationships with these families, but it's difficult a lot of times to work with people in the criminal justice system.
Here's a question on Zoom.
Yes, ma'am.
It says, how long does it take for the average murder case to go to trial?
It depends on your jurisdiction and what the backlogs are in the court, but generally from time of indictment, about 1.5 to a year. The last case I tried, the offense was in 2017, 18, 19, oh no, I'm sorry, 2019. So it was about 2.5 years. So they, it depends on your jurisdiction and how many cases that they have pending and your trial dockets.
I'm curious, how influential are the victims' families to the punishment of the person?
Sure.
I'm just curious.
In the state of Texas, you have the duty to inform the family of a plea bargain. Or when you're offering a plea bargain, you have to tell them. They don't have to agree with it, but you have to inform them prior to going forward. We listen a lot, and it depends. We have to make the decisions in the end, and you do that. A lot of times, like the last case that I did, it was a shooting in Guadalupe County. And it was the victim was a 17-year-old young woman, Michaela, and it was a drive-by. And that family wanted life in prison. The shooter was 22 years old. We were very familiar with him. Unfortunately, he came from a very rough background, and he had been involved with the criminal justice system, including being incarcerated in Texas Youth Commission back at that time. And that family, they wanted 99 years. And we sat with them, and I made an offer. And I told them, I said, no, this is what and there was a driver, a passenger, and then the shooter. And my offer was 50 years. And it's really hard for a 22-year-old man to say yes to 50 years. The family was really upset about that in that case, and it's, if you start talking about parole eligibility, cases like murder, you have to do half of your time before you're even eligible for parole. And so in that particular case, he didn't take it, and we went to trial. And at that time, the jury, he selected the jury to sentence him. Texas is one of the few states where a jury can still assess your punishment at a jury trial. You can choose. It's a bifurcated system. We have guilt, innocence, and then the second part is the sentencing phase if the person is found guilty. And the defendant gets to choose whether or not the judge or the jury will sentence them. We're one of the few states that allow that. He went to the jury, and the jury gave him 99 years. Yeah. And so, but that's the thing. And had we not, and then done that, he would have gotten the 50 years, but it would have stopped us from having to have a jury trial.
But since he's going to serve half before he's eligible for parole, it almost comes out.
Well, he's with that one particularly, 99 years. If doing half of that, he's going to be eligible for parole. And I don't want to misstate the exact number, but I'm pretty sure it's 40. It's a non-capital, so it's not till death. But at 40, so you're really only playing with 15 years. The other thing is parole eligibility does not guarantee parole. There are some people like that, this particular young gentleman, the parole board will make the decision as to whether or not he paroles. Generally, you are not paroled on your first time. And there are certain personalities that don't do well in prison, extremely violent people that will probably fight and become members of gangs, and getting out the first time is probably not going to be something that would happen. Any other questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
The things, I watched a show recently where there was a repeat offender, like you're saying this young man was. And I thought about the judge who continued to release this offender, and then he ended up, killing a young woman. And I always wonder, like, how do you
get out? Yeah.
Well, how does that judge feel? Like, they never circle back to the original prosecutor or judge and say, I mean, how do you reconcile that?
Well, that Miss Ramirez, the case where the woman was on her 6th DWI,
Exactly.
It's like, how do we get here? And we just presented a case to the grand jury of someone who actually had 2 felony DWIs out of Travis County. where he went to prison on them. So in Texas, if you actually commit an offense, a felony offense, and you go to prison and you get out of prison, then you're a repeat offender, and that's going to raise your minimum punishment. If you get out of prison, commit a new offense, go back to prison, get out of prison, commit a new offense, you are then a habitual offender, which means you are subject to 25 to life if these are felony offenses. So there are guidelines, but a lot of times some of the cases, and we look at it, oh, they've been charged with aggravated assault or sexual assault. He raped this girl. Well, how good is the evidence in that case? You know, can we really, that's one of the things that prosecutors look at when they're making statements. How good is the evidence? I've got, you know, do I have DNA, you know, CSI effect on juries now? If I'm going to prove this, you know, we're all watching CSI Miami and CSI Las Vegas. They want to have the crew there. They think that we can get DNA or fingerprints off a dope bag, or that jurors have an expectation of evidence that's going to be presented to them. And if you don't have that evidence in some of these cases, they're hard to prove. And then you've got to take it to a jury. And our criminal justice system, you know, in order to get a conviction, you've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. You know, clear and convincing if I want to take your kids away or put you in a mental health hospital, you know, preponderance of the evidence if I want to take your money. All of these scales go up beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a pretty high standard. You've got to have some good evidence, right? So in order to prove that case, so some of those cases where you hear, well, he'd gotten convicted, well, yeah, he got this plea bargain, but they gave him 3 years on a case where they could have done 20. Why did they do that? One, it could have been that they were lazy and busy and just wanted to get it done. Two, the evidence may not have been that great. And so they both have to kind of cut, we call it cut bait. You kind of have to make a decision. So, and unfortunately, the way the system is with overcrowding too, a lot of times people get out and they get released. You know, they're not doing all their time. Jail overcrowding is huge. It's huge. And they depend, you know, there's a lot of different political parties and a lot of different feelings on jail diversions and what type of programs we should do. And, you know, at some point we get to where the funding has us in a position where we're warehousing violent people. And it's like, are they any better when they come out of prison? You know, those are the kind of things that we have to address. And prisons are rough places everywhere, not just in Texas. Sure.
There's another question on Zoom that says, do you see the diversion programs working well?
So on two sides of that, and I know this is being recorded, so, and this is my personal opinion, not the opinion of my elected. I used to joke, I would call it hugs for thugs that do drugs. To tell you the honest truth, my honest opinion on it, and I went to a national training on it, I do believe the diversion programs work. I personally think it's one, even for the violent offenders. Because what we see, the particular case that I just had with Michaela's murder, which is Draven Reyes, and again, this is all public information. It's available on the internet. And it's written about in the newspapers, so I'm not disclosing names on it, you know, out of turn. He came from terrible parents. His mom's dead. She was an alcoholic. I had sent her to prison on something else. His father was a heroin addict. I mean, they come from these really horrible environments. And you know, they talk about things with just, you know, one person involved in a child's life. That's why I still do a lot of work with Child Protective Services. These programs, if we get young offenders enough and you give them some of the skills they need, anger management. Where do you learn anger management if you're not learning it at home? You're in school, you're getting kicked out of class, you're going to JJAP, you know, so these diversion programs where they're actually like held accountable and they feel like people care about them more so than just trying to get a conviction or just trying to get them out down the road. In Texas, and I feel like in a lot of the counties I work in, if you are sincere and you want to make changes in your life, the resources are there. So the diversion programs are, they do have a benefit for people that want to make a life change. And you'll see the statistics on diversion programs, they work. What's the problem with them? They cost more, but it's worth it. If you look at the long term, I honestly think the drug diversion programs, the mental health courts, and the drug diversion, mental health, violent offender programs, so, you know, sometimes we have to take the time to stop and teach people how to deal with their anger, how to deal with their emotions, and how to be productive members of society. Job training, GED, drug help, these type of things. I mean, we expect things from people that get put on probation, and you know, you've got to get your GED. Well, what if you can't read? You know, you need to show up. Well, I don't have a car. I don't have, I don't have a car. I don't have any money for gas. I don't have this. How am I supposed to get over to this program that I have to be at? Oh, I have to go do community service. Well, I didn't show up for community service. Oh, you're revoked, prison. So there's a lot. I think that if people are genuinely trying to help themselves, that the diversion courts are a great thing. I also think that for stupid kids that have come from great families, because it's not only poor people that commit criminal offenses. And I joke, someone was talking about, being in Westlake. Oh, if you're in Westlake, well, there's no sex offenders in your neighborhood. I'm like, they just have better lawyers and got off. Like, you find socioeconomic offenses happen across the board, and people with resources tend to be able to find ways to help address it. If I have resources and my child does something, I'm going to send them to a rehab. I'm going to send them to this program, or I'm going to help try to make some things to help them. And so I think the diversion programs, even for good people that do stupid stuff, that we don't criminalize them for the rest of their life, because it really is a scarlet letter. It really is getting a criminal conviction. And I think that I am just amazed with this, with Jelly Roll, the singer now that is out there. He testified before Congress about the fentanyl thing. I mean, his wife is a former prostitute, and he's a convicted felon, and he's up in Congress talking about fentanyl. And every place he does shows, including when he came to Austin, he is going out and visiting these rehab and these juvenile centers, and he's helping fund music programs and book programs. And he was really kind of putting his mouth where his money where his mouth was been, or vice versa. But these type of interactions with children, especially young offenders, I think help. So I could go on for days and hours on that subject, but I do think the diversion courts are a good resource. And you should see some of those people. One of my very good friends, Kirsten Lagore, is a county court at law judge down in Guadalupe County, and she's got a drug and another program. She goes and buys a cake out of her own pocket, like cupcakes and stuff. And those people are excited when they graduate. Like, they graduate these programs and they're getting their cupcake and their certificate. The Spurs had donated tickets at one point, and we get Spurs, they get rewarded. Some of these people come in and they're just so excited to get their cupcake, and for someone to tell them, you did a great job. You can do this. Hey, you did some stupid stuff, but you can fix your life. And so it's been really interesting. And you find that the people that work in those programs gravitate towards truly wanting to help make people's lives better.
Somebody asks, do you have teen court in your county?
We do not. I'm familiar with it, and I think it's a great program. I think it brings awareness to the problems and the issues that are going on in the community, and it's training future generations of prosecutors and defense attorneys. So I think teen courts are great, and I think that that's the same thing with holding the accountability.
As an avid reader, what is your biggest pet peeve when you read a book that's talking about the criminal justice system?
Oh, and it's just so off. Like, you're like, that would never happen, and you just, because I read some of them, and I mean, so just when the research is off, but I know they're fiction, but I grew up, like, Louis L'Amour used to be able to, he's a Western writer, but you could, like, get the maps out, and the places he was talking about were real places, but when crime writers, when they do something that's just so, like, that would never happen, so just lack of research, I guess, and stuff that's way off, but I'm a uber critical person. Like, Jenna will tell you, we watch crime shows too, and I'm like, and blah, 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 like, I already know what's going to happen. So that's my thing. I poorly researched. What do I really enjoy on the flip side of that? I get some great lines from books. Like, I learned how to do that on my Kindle, where you can send it to yourself. Like, you guys come up with some good lines that I've used. Like, that's a way to think about things in some of these stories. And it's kind of helped my critical thinking skills. I like smart, when you have good stories and you're following it. I also don't like when they jump around a lot and you're like, what's going on? Like, wait, hold on. You're trying to put too much in instead of really developing your story and your characters. I think when you develop your characters and your stories, it's really good.
Mhm.
Any questions there? I have wrote down, like, things that I wanted to make sure that I told you about. Do we have any other questions at the moment? Speaking.
Have you ever had a moment in court where, like, you were surprised
Yes.
at any point
Yes.
during the process? Oh, okay.
I had a case where the defendant was on the stand, and I was very excited. I actually had my daughter miss school because I knew that he was going to take the stand, and she had been telling me about the Fifth and Sixth Amendment. And I was like, you know what? Just, you're not going to school today. You don't have a math test, do you? Like, I can't do math, but Jen is very smart. She went to school with me, or to court with me, and the defendant took the stand. And it was a retrial. We had gotten a mistrial, and I was retrying the case, and that family was mad. That mom, and she lost her son. He was stabbed to death 72 times. And it was over in Shirts. It was off of 78, and the case had taken forever, and it had gone from prosecutor to prosecutor. And it was, yeah, that mom was just, and the family, they were an amazing family. But the defendant took the stand, and I'm always like, I just live for to get to cross-examine a defendant. And when his attorney was asking him questions, and his whole time he had said that he had stabbed him, and from the front, that he was being attacked, and it was a self-defense, and he had testified previously. Well, his attorney has him stand up and act it out. And when he did, he used his hand, which if it would have, his right hand, had he been stabbing him from the front, it would have been here, but the stab wounds were actually on the other side. And I'm like, I almost fell out of my chair. My investigator sitting behind me.
It was from the back.
He showed he was stabbed from the back into the neck. And so I was sitting there, and I'm like, did he just say that? And my investigator's blowing my phone up because it's sitting there, and I'm looking, and I'm just like, he didn't say it, but
Right.
he did it.
But he did it.
And I'm like, we're done.
Acted it
And I
out.
just, and the defense attorney kept trying to ask him questions to try to get, more time in between before he
lesson-
passed.
Lesson learned.
And it was because you have to really watch body language.
Right.
You'll see body language will tell you things, that you are, that are truly going on in a person's head. You can lie so much, but body language will give you away. But that was the biggest shock. I almost fell out of my seat. I'm like, oh my God, did he just do that? And which is great, because as soon as he passed him, I stood up and said, let's do that again. And I had my second chair put the autopsy photo up, which had the stab wounds on that side. I'm like, so how did that work? Oh no, I mean, well, okay. So you don't ever get Perry. Rarely do you get Perry Mason moments, but I felt like it. I felt like
Yeah,
it.
that
Yeah.
was kind of like.
It was a moment. That was
Yeah.
a big thing. But in court, like huge surprises like that, like people don't usually, find Jesus between the jail cell and the court stand and come up with confessions or anything like that. Normally you have all the evidence because you've investigated fully. And we provide all the evidence to defense. In criminal law, it's different. In civil law, you can kind of hide the ball. In criminal law, the state has a duty to provide you with all the evidence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just any other questions on that? So yeah, court moments. Yes, sir.
Can I, oh, sorry, can I ask you about a book, if you've ever read a book that I would love to talk to you about?
What is it called?
Marcia Clark's book, Without a Doubt, about the murder of O.J. Simpson.
No, I haven't read her book, but I'm a little bit familiar with the OJ. I've seen some of the lawyers do presentations on it.
Anyway, fabulous book. I highly recommend it to you. It's just mind blowing about the whole case. And of course, it's still unsolved and the murder person or people are still out there.
OJ did it.
Yeah.
Um,
But read the book.
I'll read the
Yeah,
book.
Marcia
Well, I
Clark
do
does
know,
so good.
I remember watching one of the,
She's
one of the,
amazing.
all those lawyers are
She
great.
is, yeah.
One of the lawyers that was actually part of the case did a presentation at one of the conferences I went to, and he was talking about stuff like allegedly OJ did not take his blood pressure medicine prior to the trial in order to make his hands swell up so that the gloves would fit. Apparently, this is all allegedly, I don't have any personal knowledge of any of this. He was not very fond of African-American friends and people, and they went into his house before the jurors went to his house and changed out the photos. The defense team did this. They went and had to find photos and had photos printed up and framed of him with more African-American people. Allegedly, this is what a defense attorney was telling as they were presenting. So yeah, there's a lot. I don't have any personal knowledge of that nor her book, but
Fascinating case.
yeah, and defense attorneys can do all kinds of things. And I was told very young age that when I was prosecuting by a very good judge that I respect, is you will win cases you should lose, and you will lose cases you should win. And that's been a bitter pill to swallow. I lost a sexual assault case. I tried it twice. I tried it in Guadalupe County and I tried it in Bexar County, and I lost that case. And I know I know he was guilty, and I've got my personal opinions on that, but there are cases. If I saw that man around my daughters, you'd be trying me. I know, so the criminal justice system isn't always just. Most of the time jurors get it right though. And I have stood next to people that have, I've been defending. I have defended murder cases. I have defended sexual assault. I defended a sexual assault case in Comal County with one of my very good friends I went to law school with, and I literally had made plans that evening. I thought it was going to be a 45-minute not guilty. It was a 7-hour guilty, and they sent him to prison for 25 years. And I cried. And it was the first time I'd been standing next to someone, and I thought the evidence, I'm like, how did they not see through this? So you never know what a jury's going to do. And when it comes down to it, you always tell yourself, I always just pray a little before I start, and I'm just like, let justice be done today, God. God's will be done, not my own, because prosecutors do have a lot of power. And you have to be very tempered with that. So in my own personal life, I've seen things that I'm like, this is just not right. But it's hard. It's not a perfect system. I think it's the best in the world, but it's not perfect. And you see the Innocence Project stuff. And that's why I work in the county. I would never work in a big office as a prosecutor. I was the elected, and I feel very confident that we did what we were supposed to do on all the cases that I was there. And I'm back prosecuting in my county because I have faith in that office that I'm there, that we're doing the right thing. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
When you were a prosecutor, did you work very much with public defenders?
No, our county did not have a public defender. Another good friend that I worked with, Susan Schoen, is now a public defender in Hayes County. They just have a grant, and she started there. She's a great lawyer. I actually tell my kids, if anyone ever, I work for the state, so I can't be adverse. Like, Susan's your lawyer. Susan Jones, a great lawyer. They do have a public defender system there now. I have not personally worked in those systems. I will tell you that they are overworked and underfunded, and that a lot of those lawyers that work there are, I call them bleeding heart, true believers. Not all of them, most of them are very smart and dedicated individuals, especially the ones that have been there for years, and they do some great work. And so but I have not personally worked in that system.
So in your county, they do not have public defenders. So what is?
Court appointed, you get on a wheel. It's a court appointed lawyer system. And so you get a court appointed lawyer if you can't. And in Texas, in order to be appointed on a death penalty case, you have to have certain qualifications. So a lot of times, the cases on those type of cases, we get lawyers from Austin. When I was the DA on the bigger cases like that, the judges would appoint lawyers.
So and then does the county pay the court appointed attorney the same kind of fees that they normally get?
So court appointed work, it depends. So when I did court appointed defense work, that's how I had a couple murder cases. So I did it was a plea bargain though, but it was a murder case. The guy had actually kidnapped his girlfriend. She'd been divorced, and he kidnapped his girlfriend from Arkansas, and he brought her to Texas. Aldo Perez was his name. Very, very good looking Mexican national man, beautiful green eyes. Like, you would see him in a man, you'd be like, wow, this is a good looking man. He hogtied her, slit her throat, and threw her off of an embankment. And her ex-husband called her in missing. She was found in Guadalupe County, and they buried her. We ended up finding out years later in one of the databases that, so it was a cold case by the time that I got it. And they had noted a ring had been put into the database also, and that was her ring, and someone made the connection. They exhumed her DNA, and that's who it was. They found her vehicle in Mexico. Well, my client had killed her. And so, having to go to meet with him, I was actually pregnant with Jenna, going to meet with him, and he was just the creepiest dude. And I'm like, and I had an interpreter that was with me who was awesome, but this guy was just creepy. But going through his case and going through that, I spent about 6 months on the case. I think I got like $3,000. So, and if he would have come into my office to retain me, that would have been a minimum. And this is back, she's 18, so 20 years ago. All right. And you're talking about 25,000 versus, 2,500 or 3,500. There's been a lot of efforts to try to raise the pay for indigent defense, but most of the time on like misdemeanor cases, it's new lawyers, and they're coming in and learning what to do. And sometimes, as a defense attorney, and it can be scary. We used to they did a wheel when I first started, and you walked into the courthouse, and they had the people that were brought up, this was misdemeanors, and you drew a name out. And I had one time I drew a name out, and you're sitting there talking to this guy, and back then there's no wall in between you. I'm sitting next to him, and he's in chains and everything. And I remember getting, this is an evil, it does exist thing, this horrible feeling, this horrible, weird feeling from him. So I went and found my friend who was like 6 foot something. And I was like, hey man, will you switch cases with me? I'm getting this weird feeling from this guy. He's scaring me. And I said, and this is like, it was like a criminal trespass. It was like a class B. He's like, I'll take my time. Just get it done today. I need to get out of it. And I'm like, and then he's like on, like really in my personal space. So we switched names and come to find out, it was an escaped prisoner out of New Jersey. He had murdered 2 people. Like he had this huge thing and he was wanted, but it was so quickly when he got brought over. And so we ended up getting done, but you got paid $75 for doing that plea bargain. And it was like, I'm just sitting next to this murderer, could have like crushed me. Yeah, the indigent defense is lacking, but a lot of the public defender's offices, some of them are not funded enough and they're overburdened and overworked, especially big cities like New York and, like even Louisiana kind of places.
So you've defended clients that you felt were guilty.
Absolutely. It's not my job to prove innocent. And a lot of people say, how can you do that? It's not my job to prove people innocent, right? I mean, it's the state's job to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone has committed a criminal offense, that they've met the elements. So as a defense attorney, and I have a lot of respect, and some of my very good friends are defense attorneys, a lot of respect for their role in the system. They have a job to be zealous advocates for their client and to hold the state to their burden. And the state's burden is to make sure that they can prove each and every element of the offense beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not my job to prove people innocent as a defense attorney. But yeah, sometimes it's hard. And I mean, a horrible case I represented, the worst person that I probably ever represented. It was a juvenile that was actually like cutting holes in his brother's underwear and sexually sodomizing him. And that kid, when I sat and talked to him, I was like, he was such an evil person. I was like, if you did this to my child, I would have killed you. Like, I'm literally feeling that emotion towards this person, but it was my job to see what's the evidence. How do we know that this happened? Oh, well, he was magistrated and he confessed. Okay. Did they follow the law before they got his confession? Did he get to meet with the magistrate? Did he was he told of his rights? Were his rights violated? That's my job, is to see if all of these things are done. Oh yeah, the state did. And you're like, thank goodness the state did their job. Good law enforcement makes defense work easier. Where you run into problems is when you have cases where it's like foregone conclusions that they think someone's done it. They take shortcuts. They don't get all the evidence. They don't do all the things. So yeah, as a criminal defense lawyer, it can be hard. And, you don't have to lie for your clients. You can't suborn perjury. If your client, sometimes the clients will try to tell you, well, let me tell you. And you're like, hold on. Let me tell you what the state says happened. Let me read you the police report before you start talking to me. Because once you tell me your story, if you decide you're going to change it, and I can't put you on the stand and have you lie. So just be quiet and let me tell you what they have on you. And so that's a lot of what you do. You just kind of don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. And
It's hard to, when you're not in that arena, to imagine, the people committing these crimes, because you kind of almost assume they're all mentally suffering from something.
you never know what people do. I used to be extremely nosy when I was young. I am not. I know more stuff about more people, and you will be really surprised what people can do. There are a lot of evil people out there, or there's people that are opportunist. You have true like sex offenders that have something wrong with them mentally. And it's like, what are you going to do with these people? You have people that commit sex offenders or people that commit crimes of opportunity. Not necessarily someone that's a true pedophile, but someone that a kid's there. So they gratify themselves with a child. You have some of those type of people, but you also just have normal people. You never know.
When you're engaging with them, to you, other than knowing about this crime, they seem like they're rational, functional.
Normal people. We used to, I would play a game in my own head. When you come in on jail dockets, they'd have the people chained up and you walk in and you see them and they're all in orange. And I'd be like, and I'd have a list of names and charges. And I would try to look at the person and be like, okay, so we have sexual assault of a child. Oh, it's this guy. Or we have just a possession of heroin. Oh, it's that guy. Kind of guess the perp is what I would just play. I entertain myself while I was waiting. It was always wrong. Like you think of things like, of people that you could trust or not trust. And And there are some people that you could trust with your child, but not your money. And there are some people that you wouldn't want within, a mile of your child. So there are people that have different things, different motivations, rich people that want to stay rich, people that have anger problems and pure accidents. So there's you can never tell. You never know it. And that's what scares me. Like when you're letting your kids go places, it's like, well, what cousin is staying there? What friend of a friend? How old are their brothers? How old are this person? My poor kids didn't get to spend the night at anyone's house their entire life, except for my investigator. They got to stay there, but my investigator had a daughter their same age, and that's the only house they got to go to a slumber party at. It's because you never know.
I was curious about emotionally and as far as the stress level, more on the prosecuting side or more on the defense side, or about equal, or depending on the case? Is that a tough?
It's harder as the state, I believe. I take that burden. I mean, as a defense attorney, we always say like prosecutors need scalpels because I have to prove certain things. I have to really work my case up and have all my evidence. Defense attorneys need shotguns. They walk in and they blow holes in your case. That's all they got to do. Most of the time as a defense attorney, you're losing. And so you have to be able to emotionally and mentally take that. How do you look at someone and say, look, you need to get your affairs in order. You're going to prison, man. You need to have a real come to Jesus with your wife because you're lying and she's about to find out and you're going to prison. Those are hard conversations. A lot of these people are used to getting away with stuff or getting things, and you're having to have some hard conversations with them. Or I had one client, this was the hardest on me as a defense attorney, and he was charged with sexually assaulting his daughter. And he came in, his church did a fundraiser, which doesn't mean anything to me, to hire me, right? And this guy had an engine taken, he was a mechanic. And his English was a bit broken. He was estranged from his ex-wife and his children. He was remarried and he had a child, and this daughter had made this outcry. And he came in to me and I'm looking at the case, and he hired us and just paid a part down. And Susan Schoen, who's now a public defender, was on the case with me. And the evidence wasn't very good. And we were like, this doesn't make sense. His estranged son called me, said, my dad was a piece, he was a terrible, terrible dad. He was an alcoholic. He did not do this to my sister. My mom, I saw her one time. He came home drunk. She took his wallet, took all his money out and drove his car into the fence. And then the next morning told my dad that he drove his car into the fence and lost all of his money before they divorced. He tells me this and I'm like, oh my gosh, I go tell it to the prosecutor. Prosecutor didn't care. She's like, whatever, I bet. And so as we're getting into this case, we realize this kid has all these problems. And I mean, even physically what this kid said happened they had a 1-bedroom house and this girl slept on the sleeper sofa right outside of a bedroom. Like it didn't make sense. And so I'm stressed. I'm like, oh my gosh. They offered him a deferred adjudication on an injury to a child, which was a non-registrable, non-sexual offense, which wouldn't even have been a conviction. And he could have gotten 2 years of probation. And I'm like, you gotta take this. He said, no. He said, one day my daughter will, and his English, like I said, was broken. One day my daughter is going to know. And if I say, yes, I did this, she will in her head think that maybe I did this. I'm like, dude, you're looking at 2 to 20. Like you could go to prison with sex offender. And I literally told him, going to prison with a sex offender label on your back is not going to be an easy time. He said, I did not do this. I will not plead to anything and God will take care of it. I didn't sleep for like 3 days. I walk into court. Yeah, she was a baby. Like, and you're just like, I'm like, all right, we're going to do this. And Susan, oh, you're walking in, walked in, stood up and announced ready. I mean, I've still got PTSD from it, and they dismissed it. And I was like, oh my, like you can't. And he just said, he said, I told you God would take care of it. I just lost 3 days of my life.
Wow.
So yeah, that kind of stress is hard. Most of your clients aren't, and I do believe he was innocent. He actually had passed a polygraph test, which polygraphs are interesting. They're just a tool. They're not legally admissible. But I had sent him to my polygrapher, who was an ex-Texas Ranger, and we hired them to get a polygraph, and I took it to the state. I'm like, look, you passed the polygraph. And the state can use it as a tool,
In Texas, it's not admissible.
In Texas, it's not admissible. I don't know of any jurisdiction where it's actually admissible in court. Because they use them as tools. And when we put sex offenders on sex offender probation, they have to take polygraphs. So it's a tool, but what they're saying is it's not reliable enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And sociopaths can pass them. If you don't think that you're lying. So it's like how good are they? They're just a tool. But, you know, and it depends on they're only as good as their polygrapher also. So it's as good as, you know, put junk in, put junk out. So anyway, it's stressful on both sides. You also, you know, every time I walk in the court, and I'm getting ready for a murder case now in March. And every time you walk in the court, I've got, you know, mom, neighbor, sister sitting there, you know, depending on me. And it's hard. Trials are hard. It's stressful. What we see and what we read is hard. Looking at pictures, the worst part of humanity. Sometimes when I would come home, more, not so much now, but when the kids were smaller, I'd almost have to shower, like, don't touch me. Don't get that shower and change my clothes before I start interacting with my kids. It's like, because you just feel like you're, and you know, it's just, there's that icky factor.
Yeah. Talk about your emotions. If you're in trial and do you get, I guess, to where you like, oh my gosh, I got so emotional. I totally forgot about this and totally forgot about bringing up this.
Notes.
Yeah.
We have outlines and notes and questions. Now I've been doing it so long, I don't write out as many of my questions. Everything that I want to talk, new stuff comes up, but everything I want to make sure, like even my list here, I just have bullet things of things I wanted to share with y'all. You can though, you can get so like, you get so excited, like when a defendant takes the stand, you're not expecting them to too. Sometimes you get so excited about what they're telling you, you'll forget, or it's just emotionally so heavy.
Right.
There's things you want to talk about, but my witness is done. Like, you know, I've got a 6-year-old on the stand and I needed to talk about, so I'm like, did I get these? You have the elements that you legally have to prove, and then get on down the road. It's like, how's my witness doing? You know, is this witness about to, you know, how far can I go with this witness? And the Ramirez case, that was my first experience with it. And I told her, Cassie, I was like, Cassie, look, if you can't do this, you need to raise your hand. And the first time I met with her, she had told me that, her hand had been, Betty had hit her with a hammer, broken her fingers, and I'm looking at her and I was like, what are you really? And I'm at the Children's Advocacy Center. And so I'm sitting in like a room that's like a living room, but it's all being videoed. And I'm talking to her and she tells me this, and she raises her hands up and I look and every one of her fingers is crooked. And I remember, I still get that. And I looked at her and I remember looking at my investigator, I actually bit a hole in the side of my cheek, trying not to cry, because trying not to show her any emotion, because little kids will tell you stuff and you have to like not, because if I look, then you're going to be like, oh, and not maybe talk or share or open up. My reaction is going to do, so you just look at, oh man, that's awful. I bet you're going to have arthritis when you get older, you know, and you just try to keep that conversation and the flow going. But you hear horrible stuff, and I try to keep a straight face, because you know, unfortunately, I mean, I've had to talk about sexual acts with 4-year-olds, you know, and you're talking about, and you're saying things like, you know, oh, glue came out of his snake, and you're like, and they'll tell you like details, and you're just having to look at it, but you don't want to look shocked. And the parents a lot of times are more traumatized if the kids, you know, than sometimes what the kids are. And that's like Children's Advocacy Center. We have trained interviewers. Children's Advocacy Centers across the state are awesome things. They have forensic interviewers that will talk to the kids and to the people. But yeah, so talking to witnesses, sometimes you hear things that's really hard and you can't unhear. You see things you can't unsee. And then in court, sometimes stuff comes up and our jurors get traumatized. We've had to provide counseling to jurors because they have to see some horrible stuff. You show up for jury duty on Monday morning, you think you're here for a DWI third, and guess what? It's sexual assault of a child or a murder, and you're looking at autopsy photos. So we deal with really hard and awful stuff.
Okay, but the people on the jury, are they the same people who are on the grand?
No,
jury?
grand jurors cannot sit on a jury because grand jurors get more information than, and they have a part in it. They're making the charging decision. So they're once the grand jurors, if you sit in a grand jury during the term, which that case was presented, you are ineligible for jury duty. And the judge will ask that question when you sit for jury duty.
I guess the burden to charge is much lower than. obviously,
Yes,
for-
so in order, and we tell them, so in order to just charge someone, you don't have to have beyond a reasonable doubt, it's probable cause, which is actually below 50%. But I tell my attorneys and my grand jurors, you need to be at beyond a reasonable doubt, because what good is it if I have probable cause and I'm in probable cause land in grand jury world, and then I walk out that door and I have proved my case beyond a reasonable doubt. So I want my cases to be beyond a reasonable doubt when I indict them or when I charge them.
But aren't a lot of times your cases still evolving?
Some, Some are, most of the time we have them, a lot of, we're still getting some things, but by the time you take a case to grand jury, you normally have pretty much all your evidence. You might be waiting for something, sometimes like lab results or DNA or some other things are getting tested. You could still be getting new evidence as you prepare for trial. But most of the time you have the vast majority of,
You got 90%, let's say.
usually. And sometimes, when the labs were really backlogged, you could go forward on drug cases, without the lab result. Because I would always tell the defense attorneys, well, who's in the best position to know if it was Coke or not? You're fine, right? But normally you can go forward with a test. We would make the decision because we have probable cause. If we have a lab test that says, yeah, it's methamphetamine, and then go forward and then the lab will come in while you're waiting. But as soon as you charge, they can file a motion for speedy trial and you can get forced to trial within like 30 days, 10 days. You
Plus you
can,
have that 90-day
well, that's beforehand. that you-
beforehand. So is that sometimes a factor in like trying to get evidence before the grand jury, but
Yes.
you may not have it all?
Yes, and we tell them that. We say, this is what we have, this is what we expect, and then you can file a motion for continuance. But those are only on your big cases. Most of the time, you don't care, unless they're violent offenders, a lot of times you don't really care if they bond out. Unless they're a danger to the community, they're gonna bond out. That 90 days is for people that can't bond out and can't afford it or can't whatever. It's just a safety net so that people don't just languish in jail forever without their case being looked at by the prosecutors. Yes, ma'am.
Feel about, well, you see it on TV, how do you feel about defendants demanding their right to testify?
So yeah, they can. Rarely, I've had it the 2 times in my career that I could think of it, they wanted to come and speak. And one time it was actually helpful. And because they're not entitled to an attorney in grand jury chambers. Your attorney can be outside waiting and you can go back and forth. The other time, it was such a train wreck. Like when he went out to go talk to his attorney, I told his attorney I wouldn't send him back in there. They wanted more charges. Like he was trying to, but it was a very controlling person who thought he was smarter than everyone else and was trying to and it did not go over well with the grand jury. And he was awful. So they can, if they ask, they have an absolute right. If they want to talk to the grand jury, we bring them and we let the grand jury know that they've requested to speak with them. The grand jury can decide to have them come or not. And when they do, yes. And when they do want to come, grand juries always say, bring them. Yeah. If they get a live, hey, next month, I've got some live witnesses, bring them in. They want them. When they do that, we actually get the testimony transcribed. It is still confidential. It has to be a court order to get that released to be used later.
Wait, can you talk about this a little more? I've never heard of this. So is this kind of just in Texas?
No, so if someone wants to, you can present evidence. So the grand jury is a fact finding, they're an investigative body.
Yeah.
And so if a defendant is being investigated and they want to go to the grand jury, they can send a letter to the prosecutors who has to give it to the grand jurors and say, hey, my client wants to come to grand jury. So they can come, but then they're subject to, they get sworn testimony, and they're subject to have to answer questions, and their attorney doesn't get to be in there with them. So they have to, they can sit out in the hall. I mean, this guy literally was getting up, and then he's out there yelling at his attorney, and the grand jurors are like, you need to charge him with blah, 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 blah. I'm like, hold on, let's just get through this day.
So this guy's trying to tell him why he's not guilty?
Mhm. And why the police are setting him up, and why that his ex-wife was a liar, and why, yeah, I'm just making stuff up there. That's not
Diarrhea of
specific.
facts. You can just
Yeah, some of them are really good and they want to bring they have evidence that they're look, law enforcement didn't do a good job and this is why.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just speaking hypothetically, not
Right.
exactly what happened in chambers. So,
oh, I never knew this could even happen.
and it's
This-
confidential. Everything that happens in grand jury is confidential.
This is, wow, is that very common for these people to ever?
No.
No.
They don't
Attorneys
want to
tell them
come.
not really not to do it.
You can do grand jury subpoenas and make people show up and they are so uncomfortable. They do not want to be there. And we'll do that sometimes when there's multiple parties and you subpoena them all and then you have them all sitting there and they can't discuss with each other what the testimony, because it's all confidential, what they're asked, what they respond, what happened, it's all confidential. And you get them sitting out in the hallway and there can be some fireworks. We have to usually have extra security. What did you tell them? Wait, you're trying to get him to disclose information that's confidential before the grand jury?
There's a lot of discussion on true crime, shows about, and what would you advise if you had a friend who was suddenly charged with a crime? Would you say get an attorney and take a polygraph, or would you say don't get an attorney and don't take a polygraph? Because there's so much discussion on if you get an attorney, it makes you look guilty. And if you take if you say I'm not taking a polygraph, it makes you look guilty.
Okay, so you don't really care how you look to law enforcement, right? Because law enforcement probably thinks you're guilty. That's why they're talking
Oh,
to you,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So Jenna, if you ever got stopped by law enforcement, what would you do if you were arrested?
Not talk to them at all, and I would ask for a lawyer.
So, you know, the law enforcement, you have a right, you have an absolute right to a lawyer. You don't have a right to a parent. But you have a right to a lawyer. And so you can, and I can't be her lawyer because I represent the state of Texas. But you want to use your rights. But also it depends on what it is. Like if you're being charged with an offense, if it's something silly, that you know that you can take care of, something easy, you know, you might want to just talk with law enforcement. If you're just answering questions, because a lot of times law enforcement will be, oh, they lawyered up. What are they lying about?
Okay.
You know, so there is that perception if you ask for a lawyer that you're lying. But you have that absolute right. And a lot of times, you know, if you are, you know, you have the right to remain silent. There's that Ron White, that famous comedian. He has the shirts that said, I had the right to remain silent. What I lacked was the ability. See, I really do love one-liners. But yeah, you have the right to an attorney. You have the right to remain silent. And a lot of times people, they want to try to explain themselves. And what happens is when you get that first version of your story out, we've got that recorded, we're typing that up, we're getting a transcript. And if you're telling the truth, that's not going to change, right? You're going to tell this person and this person and this person the same story because you're not making stuff up. If you're making stuff up, stuff's going to change. You know, if I want to say that Miss Waller's wearing a green sweater, and then I'm going to be, then what did I say that she was wearing? You're trying to remember 3 weeks later when we're talking, what color was her sweater? Oh, but if I know it's purple in my head, it's purple, right? That's never going to change because that's what's here. You know, and when you try to remember your story, you're going to get caught up in it. And I'm like, as I told you, I'm not the best writer, but I'm really good at looking and finding out. And a lot of lawyers are really good at this nitpicking. And it's not the same, you know, you said this time, well, you said this time. There's a big difference because words matter. Words matter. And so talking to an attorney, you know, polygraphs, if they're only as good as the person that does them, if my children were kidnapped and law enforcement was there and the FBI was there and they said, would you take a polygraph? I would absolutely take one immediately, right? So they could rule me out. If I was arrested for something and they said, hey, do you want to take a polygraph? I would say, let me think about that. Because they're not always right. There are reasons you could take, and I've never taken one. I had a prosecutor that I really respected. He became an Army Ranger. Really, really liked him. He's a defense attorney now. He's a great prosecutor. And he failed a polygraph on a burglary case when he was in college. And they ended up finding the real people that did it. It all went away. He got it done. He went to law school and became a prosecutor, became an Army Ranger. But he failed, and he always had a bad taste in his mouth for polygraphs after that. So I don't know, you
Because it
know,
measures how
stressed out.
anxious you are.
But they take into account your personality and your stuff, but you know, and even smart people can play a lot of games with them. And then real liars don't get anxious because sociopaths don't get anxious, you know. So there's a lot of mental health things there too. Any other questions? I don't know how long I've been talking. I can talk for days.
You'd see where.
I love this, but I truly love criminal law. I have my degrees in criminal justice. I lived this. I really do appreciate it and like this. So I could talk as much as y'all want, and I know you have a time meeting for your meeting. Ms. Waller?
I'd like to ask, this was, excuse me, this was well before your time. You might have been living in Barry. Just like to know if you've heard anything about it. There was a woman in Seguin who was killed by a shotgun blast in her art gallery, which is about a block off Courthouse Wick. And she was the wife of a rather prominent citizen. Now, of course, that was discussed in the teacher's lounge. And one of the teachers said that a law enforcement officer, some lower level, had said when this all comes out, gonna blow the county wide open. Well, about that time, I escaped from Marion and taught in San Marcos at the college for a couple of years. And when I went back, I suddenly thought of that. I said, whatever happened to that case? And they said,
Nothing.
it just suddenly,
Huh.
nothing.
You'll have to, if you have do you have the name? You don't have to announce it on the open meeting that's being recorded, but you can write it down for me and I can look it up because Arnold's got a Sheriff's Wiki has a cold case division and I do a lot of cold cases. There's actually one from Marion. I thought that was one you were gonna bring up that I'm working on right now. It's actually from like the 1980s. And so I do work cold cases and the Texas Rangers have a cold case division and we have a ranger in our area that's working on the cold cases. You'll have to give me the name and I'll look it up because there's a few. And a lot of times what people hear and people say stuff all the time and you're like, that's so not true. Like, you know, or they'll tell you something and I like to go to the scenes of where things happen so I can see and get a feel for things. That's another thing. If you're writing books about areas, things I don't like, if you're writing about a town, if it's a real town, go to that town. Be real and like the names of the places and the things and the streets. Because sometimes you read it, you're like, that is just not like people try to write about Texas. And you're like, this is not small town Texas. We're not wearing 10-gallon hats, you know, we're in Carhartts and Red Wings, you know, I mean, it's, you know, get the information on that. But some cold cases are a whole genre too. And a lot of them are being worked. So you'll have to give me the name and I can let you know, but.
I think I remember a name.
Okay, I'll look it up. There's some interesting stuff. You'll find some stuff from long, that gets swept under the rug.
It was so long ago, it's not coming up on Google.
Ah,
The name of the gallery is coming up in Bernie.
huh.
I believe that house, the gallery, was moved. fairly
Interesting. I can ask, 'cause we definitely have a cold case.
I've been too lazy to go back and find the Seguin papers.
I can ask Felicia, the editor, she's a crime buffy too. I could ask her about it too. I'll ask her. And Arnold's a wealth of information. That's the elected sheriff that's down there. He's retiring this year, but he's also from Marion. He knows a lot of the cold cases and some of the rangers will look through them. A lot of them will just die away because there's, you know, people die and they don't know about it.
Will the yogurt shop murders ever get resolved, do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Those, you know, there's some things that hopefully, yes, eventually things do come out and you'll find a lot of times even too, like deathbed kind of confessions from people that are already in prison on other cases, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of unknowns out there.
Yogurt shop kind of did, that's another long story. I lived here and I was living very close to that when that happened, you know, and it kind of did.
And that was the young lady that, oh, wait, I thought we tried that case. Didn't that case get tried?
Oh, several times, yes.
That was,
What
what was his name? Start with the M, was it?
I don't remember his name. I didn't want to say his name, but yeah, there was a man who was tried for that.
But that case,
Believe convicted.
Oh,
One of the three men who were involved in that, I believe. There's three men.
yeah, I was not,
Overturned. Maybe I'm wrong.
you might, it's,
Yeah, it kind of did go unsolved.
was that the Texas, the UT student that was killed in that
Yeah,
shop?
there's women, there's.
And I think one of them was that,
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, no, it was 1991, I remember.
So it's 4 young girls working in
They were all high
2 were working
Yeah.
and 2 were visiting.
I think one was a
And-
UT student, because I think it was Mr. Frost's daughter, one of the attorneys from Seguin. I think it was his daughter that was killed, one of the daughters. But yeah, I'm not real familiar with that case. But a lot of these cases, eventually stuff does come out, but sometimes it,
There's another question online. It says, has the legal requirement to list unknown dead in a database led to identifying a lot of people or moving cold cases forward?
there's been some hits on the databases that come back with the DNA that has been helpful. Yeah, I think in the ancestry.com and some of these other people where people are voluntarily putting their DNA out there, that has helped find some unknown case, because like unknown persons that have, because a lot of them have already been buried.
Oh, yes, it caught the Bay Area. killer.
Yeah, and so those ancestors, you know, people are voluntarily providing, and what it can do is it gives you lines, and we're actually working on one right now. It's very interesting because it gives you lines and you know that they're in this familiar lineage, but you don't know how close they're related and the amount of DNA. This is kind of actually the opposite. It was DNA that was found in at the murder scene that didn't belong there, and it's tying something. So that's an ongoing cold case that we're investigating, and these databases have helped provide that information. So yeah, the databases are very useful. And the flip side of that is it's also Big Brother, so be careful what you're putting out there.
Yeah.
Any other questions for me? What else did people, what did I want to tell you about the surprise defending? I had a funny story. If you guys want to hear the funniest story that I've had that was a defense attorney. And I had a man that was charged with evading arrest or detention in a vehicle with a hearse. So he, in order to, and Mr. Lindsay is his name, in order to buy a coffin in Texas, you have to have a license. And he was working at a funeral home and he was buying multiple coffins and he was doing his side hustle. And he was also a makeup artist that would help with the process of getting you ready for a funeral. And his side hustle was to buy coffins, and he would do funerals on the side cheap. And then I'm like, where are you burying these people? He did this whole fake thing at the cemetery. Yeah.
Where was he buried?
In the same cemeteries, but he was, it was crazy. He got caught, but the funeral, it was down by the coast in an area that was a little bit less regulated and populated than here. So it was a little easier where he was at. But he was in shirts buying it and he fled. And the person that was selling the coffin, he had the license for one, and what he was doing was buying two. So he had legally, and then they realized paperwork that he didn't have the license. So he got caught, but he evaded detention, and the video was crazy because he's in a hearse with two coffins, and they threw the strips down, and he spins out and the thing comes open and one of the coffins comes out. I'm like, this could be a movie. He was a funny man. I went, so back then,
So what happened to him?
he got state jail. It was like he got 6 months. He was very friendly, very nice. And he had pink Liz Claiborne glasses, and he was in his orange jumpsuit. And I went back and they're in a room like this and they're all kind of chained together, and you go back to talk to your client. So I walked back there to go talk to him, and I'm like, I need Mr. Lindsay, please. And he stands up with his pink Liz Claiborne glasses and he looks at me and he says, girl, where are your stockings? Oh, dude, it's 100 degrees outside. And he was the funniest man. So that's the funniest defense story I had. So a lot of the people that I defended, and a lot of people that most defense attorneys deal with, are just people that can't manage their lives. They're funny people that are just trying to do he was just trying to make side hustle some money. A lot of them have interesting stories, but there's some funny stuff too.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You can't make that up.
You can't, no, I mean, I can still see him standing up and looking at me, and I was like, Mr. Lindsay, just really. So there's,
Range of perfection, right?
yeah, it really is. I mean, I couldn't make this up. I'm no fun at parties because I get dark very quickly. Like when I'm talking about stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, so yeah, no, I don't trust any, like, where'd my kid go? Are you in the bathroom? I mean, like, and it can be scary. I was just actually at lunch the other day, and we were, I have to be careful sometimes in a small town, like what restaurants you eat at. Some people love you, some people hate you. Sometimes I go to pay for my meal and someone's already paid for it. And I'm like, wow. And then they're like, thank you. And then other times I'm like, oh, let's not eat here. Like I sent his wife to prison. He hates me. We were in line there was a murder case. We had a witness that was very, very contentious to the state. I think he might have been way more involved than what we could prove. And he was known to carry a machete in his pants. He was an immigrant from Honduras. And he had a huge scar across his face, and he could not stand us, and he glared at me all the time. And I was in line to get a snow cone in Seguin with my kids after the 4th of July parade. I was like, we're leaving now. And my kids are like, a snow cone. I'm like, nope. So you have to be very cognizant. And I generally carry a firearm, not into the library, but when I'm driving or when I'm in trial, those kind of things. When the Kaufman County DA's office when the Kaufman County DA was murdered, who ended up being murdered by a justice of the peace, we had DPS officers parked in our driveway. I've had the sheriff's officers at my house in our driveways, and it's pretty funny.
Sorry, back up. Say again.
Kaufman County, the district attorney was shot, but it ended up being a justice of the peace. It was a JP that shot him, but they thought it was tied to the white supremacy. They tried to spin it to make it look like because he'd been prosecuting some of those cases. And there was a tie with the meth coming out of South Texas, coming through our area. And we had a few of those people in custody. And so the DA was shot and killed in that county. It was in Kaufman County. And, gosh, that was like 2010-ish, 2011. And all, they thought that there was a hit out on all DAs.
And so, but they found out an actual officer in that county shot. the
One of their
on purpose?
elected yes, he killed him. It was because of the DA had uncovered some theft and that person was about to get indicted. Yeah, that was a 2020 special. But we were scared. So you have some scary things, you know, and I look at people, even as an attorney, like, you know, the family law cases are scary too. Being attorneys, family law is worse than, I'd rather try a murder case than a family law case, because they say that like defendants and people in the criminal justice system are bad people behaving their best, and that people in the family justice and in the divorce courts are good people at their worst. And so it really is what people can do to each other is ugly. And you see a lot of it at the courthouse.
So you're gonna, what's your next book about? I'm curious, are you writing anything right now?
Right now, no. And that's funny is I was like, this is probably the first time that I haven't been getting ready to get on a ballot that I've gone to talk to, because normally you get out and go talk to groups when you're going to run for something. But I am looking at a judicial bench eventually. So I'll look, but my residency is Guadalupe County. I live down there, but my kids go to school here, so I'm back and forth a lot. But I'll be looking at probably a bench,
In that county?
my home county. That's where I'm from. I went to high school there.
Guadalupe?
Guadalupe County. There's a bench that's Guadalupe, Hayes and Comal to the 274th. So some of those, I like where you're not just stuck in one place.
You're northeast of Bear County, is that right?
North, west, yeah,
Oh, you're
between San Antonio and Houston.
You're northwest of Bear County. Bear County,
Yes,
Guadalupe.
no, east towards Houston.
Oh,
I'm like, west, I'm like, no, west. Houston. We had an article at the time I was in office, and it was like the I-35 corridor, because you had, the Bear County was Susan Reed, and then you had Jennifer Tharp and I, which were on I-35, and then you had Sherry Tibby, and then we had, y'all had, what was her name? Lindbergh,
Oh, yeah.
Lindbergh, and then it was in Williamson County. We had the whole I-35 corridor was in it. I think the article was called "Women Are Taking Over I-35 Corridor." We were all DAs. It was all female DAs through that corridor. So the I-35 corridor is where I've pretty much practiced most of my career.
I see.
Did a little bit of a stint in Travis's doing personal injury, but I couldn't stand ambulance, Jason. I know. It's funny. It's like those, you know, they're very necessary evil in our system, but insurance companies and PI lawyers,
You're not a planned attorney.
I'm not. I'm a street lawyer. I work in the criminal justice system. I'd make my bank account would be better if I could do more civil and that kind of stuff, but I'm at the courthouse. I like being in court. I like talking to people. I like helping people. I always had the opportunity to say that I can speak for those that cannot speak for themselves. I can advocate for those that cannot advocate for themselves, whether it be a defendant or a child. And I do a lot of volunteer work with True Light. It's funny because it's back in Marion, and it's kind of gone full circle. Those kids that are at True Light are placed there. It's an emergency children's shelter for foster children. And it's located in Marion. They go to Marion ISD. And it's been interesting, you know, being back kind of in my own hometown to help out with some of those foster kids.
Good.
Any other questions? I think that was, I had my funny story. I was like, tell them a funny story. Don't freak them all out. The other thing that's huge, and I know it's out there right now too, is the fentanyl. Talk to your kids, grandkids, neighbors. Fentanyl is really scary, really, really scary. They are finding it. We're getting lab tests back where drugs, more so than I've ever seen in the 22 years I've been practicing. It's coming back. Heroin's being laced with it, cocaine, meth, MDMA, which is like ecstasy, other tablets that are pressed tablets. They're finding residuals of that fentanyl on it. The number of deaths from fentanyl each year is rising like crazy. So I just tell everyone, talk to your kids, don't take stuff, talk to your neighbors, be very, very careful on the drugs that are out
Is it
there.
just a lot cheaper? Is that why it's everywhere?
It's potent.
Oh, so
Yeah,
it's
it's potent. And
Uh,
there's a lot of different theories on that of it, you know, that basically we're at war and fentanyl is being put into our communities. It's just scary. It's dangerous. It's a real thing. You hear it on the news. It's a real thing. We're seeing it. We're seeing drug tests come back with stuff that people think that it's one thing and it's another thing. You're like, wow, our officers, you know, they're gloving up. They're being very careful.
It's like 100 times more potent.
It can kill you. One
Yeah.
pill. I think that's one of the taglines on the stuff now. One pill can kill.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
there's
scary.
that police officer that.
Absorb.
There's powder that.
So
just-
you
Well,
can
and you can
absorb it.
absorb it.
Yes.
It can be absorbed and it can be inhaled.
Uh-huh.
It's
And
very
so he-
dangerous.
He overdosed as he was doing a bus
Wow.
because like this bag
Yeah.
opened and it's.
Oh.
And I will also say, going back to law enforcement, I have prosecuted law enforcement officers and sent them to prison. I also represented them. I have a lot of respect for law enforcement. The stuff that you see on the movies it's horrible. The things that have happened that we see, there are some bad people that do gravitate towards law enforcement. But I do want to tell you that the vast majority of your police officers are good men and women that are putting their lives at risk every day for us and our families. I see a lot of that. I do hate that, the culture where that's getting really bashed. I mean, there have been some bad things that have happened, yes, and those people should be prosecuted fully. I tell my officers when I'm doing trainings, you know better, you're going to be held to a higher standard. And so, but the vast majority of the police officers that we have are good people doing good work.
Do they carry, is it Narcan that?
Yes,
Narcan's
a lot of-
people back
A
from
lot of them,
overdosing, and do they carry that with
Personally.
them?
it's everywhere. I mean,
It's over the counter now, so you don't need a
But
prescription.
they have-
anymore. Yeah.
vending machines for it. It's probably like,
Wow.
and I know like 3 different parents in my own neighborhood that have all kind of said, hey, we have it in our garage right here if you need
And
it.
you can administer it by inhalation. So
the
it's just a
oral-
little- Yeah, it's really easy to administer now. So it's like everywhere. It's like,
They
and
have them.
the problem
Well,
is,
animals, I've just read some, I don't know if this is true or not, so please don't take this down, but I heard that animals can also OD from fentanyl and that they have a shot for animals.
but the problem is that there's that sedative that's being mixed in. And so it doesn't reverse the sedative. It's a veterinary sedative that's on the street
Ah.
now.
Why would they do that?
Don't take anything. I've been telling my kids,
There are
please
people
don't
that
take
wanna get
anything.
high off of anything. And
It's
so
desperation and cheap affordability, availability, affordability, and
they're trying
desperation.
to escape the problems. I mean, it's a coping mechanism. It's a bad,
Why
bad.
would the sedative be mixed into it? That's what doesn't make, I mean, none of it makes sense. but
No,
That's
but
what makes
It's
less
scary.
sense.
It's scary. So when you're writing or you're doing stuff, just remember our law enforcement officers, they're not all bad people, but they're not all necessarily good people either.
they're just people.
Yeah. And you have to look at sometimes people, you find with prosecutors, there's people that are attracted to it, whether they were victims themselves, or whether they have this God complex that they want to go out and save the world, or they want to just put people in prison. So a lot of times you get a combination of that, but law enforcement officers also takes a certain type of personality. I mean, you got people that are going to stand up there and take a bullet for you. So, those are some, and sometimes those kind of people, not like any field, you can attract all kinds. But I do want to tell you, working in the criminal justice system, I am board certified in criminal law, done a lot, and I've read a lot of police reports, and watched a lot of police videos. The vast majority of our officers are doing a great job out there. Any other questions? That's all I
Thank
covered
you so
everything. How
much.
long have I been talking? Is it? doing-
An hour and a half.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
No,
can
no,
keep
no,
y'all
that's
here
great.
till 4.
We really appreciate
Very
your
interesting.
coming.
Yeah,
Thank
does
you so
anyone else
much.
have any, I truly love this. I guess you can tell when I'm talking about it. I truly love criminal justice. I love crime novels. I'm trying to look at the last one.
I'm curious, is crime today any more bold and violent than you saw 20 years ago?
I think so. And I think one of the things that I think on that is, I do, I don't wanna get off on my soapbox, but I will, because I'm here and I'm already talking for an hour and a half. I think that the violence in our society has become so much more mainstream, like what our kids are seeing, all this crap on TikTok, all this stuff on YouTube, that and video games, the violence. I see a lot more, and I actually had a conversation with a use of force expert, and we were talking about like these shootings and this stuff, because I've had, I mean, in the last couple of years, I'm prosecuting younger prosecutors for 72 stab wounds. That kid was like under 30, the 22-year-old that did the shooting. And I think the value of life sometimes goes down in some of these societies because we are dealing with broken kids that have been through the system, that have been neglected. I also think they see a lot of it, so they become desensitized to it. Put trash in, you're going to get trash out. I think they're seeing all the time this really bad stuff. We're allowing on our public TV more sexually explicit stuff. More, our kids are being sexualized at a very young age, and the exposure to it is making like the value of things not what they were, from a person's life to virginity to, honesty. You see these people like on these just billions that, how do you get rich? You steal, just the basic core ethic value. I'm hoping at some point we're going to have a turnaround, but yeah, I've seen a lot. And the other thing is too, the population growth. So we have more people, but we also have more of it
on video, like we're watching it. I get cases now, I'm like, good grief, because every officer's got a body cam. So I gotta watch like 2 hours of video. I'm listening to like the officer singing, you know, as he's driving down the road, because then I've got this scene. So everything is on camera now too, which has been wonderfully helpful in a lot of cases. But also, you know, we're seeing more of it because it is videotaped. People have their phones. If something bad's happening, you're videoing it, you know, you have a car accident, we have pictures of it. The availability to document offenses, we're getting to see more. But I do think that people have become a little bit more violent, that the value and respect for life has gone maybe downhill, some of the values. And now I'm gonna go to the breakdown of the family and and the computers and all this stuff. You know, I do think our society, there's a lot of really good people and a lot of people working for change. But there's a lot of bad people out there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You look at video games, Apex Legends, for example, and you know, and you talk to kids who are like, oh yeah, I grew up playing Apex Legends every day. You know the game Apex Legends.
Yep.
And these other games that are extremely violent.
Well,
Some
and-
kids get out of it. They're okay.
And what are you
Some
doing
kids
on these
don't.
games? You're
Right.
shooting, right? And the
Sensitized
use
to
of
it.
force, and I go back, I went off on a tangent, but the use of force expert was saying that kids used to fight, right? Like physically, we would get into a fight and in 6th grade and 5th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade, you would have a tumble or out in the playground and you would take care of things and it would be this physical thing. Now it's not. Now it's threats. Now it's this. Now it's that. Now it's guns. You know, that scares me to death. What am I scared of? Drunk drivers and my kid's school getting shot up.
Mhm.
She's called, texted me from home and I'm up all night because she said, I hear, she's in her dorm and I hear shots, Mom. I'm like, stay in your dorm, stay away from the window, blah, blah, blah. You know, thank goodness she finds out it's just ROTC practicing by her door. But I'm freaking out, you know, I'm like, stay away from the windows. Those are and that's our parents' nightmares, is these shootings and things. And I do think that we've become a society that way permissive with guns and, you know, my feelings on that and just the availability and the use to violence, because we watch it all the time. And I think sometimes it and I am a member of the NRA. I mean, so I'm gonna say that, but the flip side of that is I do think that guns are too available. I do think that guns are too, like, shooting is being trained into our kids from such a young age. They're killing people in video games. So we're indoctrinating them on how to behave as members of our society, where they're blowing people's heads up.
Yeah, they were meant to train soldiers.
Well, even like the old flight simulators and stuff. Why were they using video games way before us? Because that's what it does. So I do have some fears for our society about those things. Yeah. Anything else? Any questions about your books? How long does it take to write a book? Has anybody been published in here? Do I get to ask those kind of questions? Yes, ma'am. You've been published?
Oh, yeah, I'm on the 9th.
Nice.
Stephanie, actually.
I'm my 4th.
Oh, awesome. You'll have to email me the names so now I
Okay.
can go look and look these up. I'm always looking for stuff to read.
Yeah, actually, I'll send you our website. We have a lot of members who have published books.
Well, and if you guys have questions, you can put my
Happy
email
to.
up there. I love this. I'm passionate about it. And I like reading good books. Like, it's kind of like popcorn for me. But it's really interesting. And when they're factually correct about, although what we really do, I sound all great and glory. It's really boring most of the time. Like, you're like the judge is falling asleep when I'm talking, you know, it's like, hey, but there's a lot of really interesting things that happen at the courthouse. If you guys have questions, you can ask me. And we had talked in the email about the ME's office and our relationship with the medical examiner.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's a really cool anthropologist. He's probably gonna be mad if I tell you this, but do you know we have a body farm in San Marcos?
Yeah.
Tell Jenna to go
Yeah.
down there. I had to go down there on a case. I've used them before. We had some stuff, but this was actually, well, it's coming up in March, so I'm not gonna talk too much about it, but we have an expert that's gonna come testify. And we got to go to the body farm and I'm like, this is cool.
It's a state.
Yeah, it's part of Texas State's, their anthropology department, it's a PhD level program. And but the guy that runs it, he's my expert in my case. He's awesome. He loves it. He's like, we come down there, he'll give you a tour.
We invite him.
He would probably come speak. And then there's Dr. Thorne lives off Cuernavaca. Yeah, he's his son and my son, because and I was funny because I kept looking at him. I'm like, this guy, his son played football, and he asked me to spend the night. I'm like, okay, well, who's your wife and what do you guys do? Like, I asked a billion questions where my kids spend the night. He's a criminal psychologist. I'm like, I see you in court. I said, you were on Thorne.
Oh,
Thorne. He's a criminal, and he's done some sex offender evals. And I'm like, I've seen you before, but he lives right down here. I shouldn't.
And how do you spell his name?
THORNE.
Oh,
He'll appreciate me throwing him out there.
She donated her body.
And she was tall. Right, Miss Beck? And her son, didn't you have the son that,
Ryan, yeah.
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 Yeah, it's interesting. They take donations and then those are the ones that they actually will put out like in the elements and do the things with. A lot of the times when your estate gives it to you, they're not gonna do those type of things because they don't know if the person really wanted that. And they've gotten bodies from all over, including Europe, like England
Wow.
and stuff, yeah. I took some pictures of, and they keep the bones and then they have them, and they had like the tallest man that they have that had been, the bones had been donated, and then like the shortest woman that they had. It was really interesting because like the femur was like this on him, and then on her, it was like this. So it's a pretty cool, there's a lot of resources, and you'll find that a lot of people in this field will love to talk to you. Because we enjoy it and it's good to get good work from y'all. The ME's office, oh, that's the thing. We don't work like hand in hand investigating. They don't go out in the field. Those guys, you have to go to more medical school to become a medical examiner and work on dead people than you do to actually be a treating physician. It's interesting. We use Travis County Medical Examiner's Office, Bear County, and Dr. Chukak, he left the ME's office and he's in Georgetown now. He has his own facility. And he's pretty good too. He was a great witness. A lot of times doctors can be pretty dry, but he was a really good witness. So there's a lot of really good resources in the Austin area.
Who's your favorite author?
So it sounds so cheesy, but I love all of Grissom's books, you know, and Louis L'Amour growing up, I've read all of his and it sounds bad. And I was like, I read Game of Thrones before HBO. Like I'm a nerd. Like
Yeah.
my kids, I wish would read more. They didn't quite get that as much as I did, but
Firm's a great book.
yeah, all of the, I've read all of
Well, you just
his,
came out with a brand new too.
what is,
Um,
I'll have to look it up. I didn't know there was a
Just
new one.
finished it.
I do a
Super
lot of
duper.
Audible now, and I'm actually, there's an Irish, right? My mom's from Ireland. She's not an American citizen, so that's kind of a cool little telling her out there. But there's an author that she's written some good shit. Her books are pretty good.
Which one?
I have to look at her name. I'll look at it. I'll grab my phone when we're done talking. Any other questions? I hate to keep talking, but I can if y'all have more questions. Any other questions online? They're all asleep.
I think they all said thank you.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for coming.
Oh, I know. Thank you so much.
Go cover, what is it? Pets, people and plants.
Yes. The 3 Ps.
Oh, so what am I reading right now? So I read A Flicker in the Dark by Stacy.
Oh, I'm reading that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. uh-huh.
All the Dangerous Things, same author. That was good.
Oh, really?
All Good People Live Here. That one was good.
Yeah.
That's Ashley something.
Flowers.
Ashley
And-
Flowers.
Oh,
Oh,
it's Keister.
Yes.
Oh,
had
a
a
great book. I don't know if y'all have read
ghostwriter
this though. Patrick Rufus, That Empire of Pain.
I haven't read that.
It's not a mystery. It's a nonfiction. I honestly, I had to listen to it twice and I actually went and looked up some of the stuff that I was like, this can't be real. It's on the Sackler family and on the opioid crisis. It is the best, but I've read it twice. I've bought it for my brother.
Yeah, it's,
Wrapped in Rain. That's a good
Empire.
one. It's about the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
It's unreal. And the Sackler family and the FDA, you're not going to trust anything the government did.
It's,
Oh, I believe it.
there's also a Hulu series,
On the pain.
based off of another book that an investigative journalist wrote about the Sackler family. It has
Oh,
Michael
really?
Keaton in it. Can't remember, but it was really good. It was very eye-opening because a lot of the stuff I learned in med school, I'm just like, oh, yeah, we were manipulated.
Oh, it's beyond, and you've got to read that Empire. I went back, I was like, this can't be true. I actually went and pulled some of the testimony from Congress.
Uh-huh.
This is unbelievable.
Wow.
And then the FDA, the people that were in charge of like
Mhm.
grading their papers and passing the studies, you know, they then retire and then go work and
Hired.
get $2.5 million a year to go work for them. I'm like, this is
Well, and a lot of
criminal.
prosecutors were like
Or the
hired as consultants.
Consultants when they came off from the US Attorney's Office. I look at that and I'm like, they're pain management doctors, like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like legalized drug dealers.
Yes.
And then you have these people that really need some of these medicines
I
and
know,
you have this
it's sad
pain.
because then it's like, there are people that actually do need it, but they don't get access to it because now everybody's like clamped down.
Right.
Yeah, and then fentanyl. I remember when I was a resident and they're like, oh, here's you can give your patients fentanyl lollipops. I'm like, what?
I had a procedure done at my periodontist office and they gave me fentanyl and I didn't even know I was gonna get it. It was horrible. I told him I'm never having surgery again there.
Oh, yeah,
Because of the fact that they gave me that.
fentanyl. I don't like any type of pain medication. I have a
either.
real high pain
Yeah.
tolerance. I'm like, don't
Like,
drug
no.
me,
I
just
mean,
let me sleep.
Tylenol and
Yeah.
ibuprofen are
I was
actually,
so
actually there's
upset 'cause
studies
it
that
was so
show
strong.
the combination of Tylenol and ibuprofen is just as effective as opioids.
Yeah, that's what they said the last time my significant other just had knee surgery and they gave him that. They also gave him,
I was shocked that they gave that to me. I
What is
thought we
the-
got opiate,
remember-
especially without prior consent.
oh, man. Well, you probably signed it in one of the papers that you signed.
Yeah.
Colleen Hoover, I read all of her
Oh,
books.
yeah.
Those are
Yeah,
little,
she is, so she's from North Texas. And she was an indie author. Who blew
Oh,
up.
nice.
She used to be a social worker
Oh, cool.
and now she's like.
oh, that one other book that was really good, that Just Mercy. They made a movie out of that.
loved that. See that?
That
I thought
one,
about going to law school and doing that kind of work just from that book alone.
the vast majority of people that are in the criminal justice system are guilty. Like, those are far and few between, but it happens. And
It
it's
was
scary.
so
That's what
sad.
keeps you up at night is when you have innocent people getting caught up in the
And
system.
it was so sad. I mean, like the movie, definitely ended on a higher note than the book. Because in
Yeah.
the book, even after justice was served, his life was so wrecked.
It always is. And,
Yeah.
and all the stuff that happens in prison to people is horrible.
Yeah.
Our criminal justice system really needs reform.
Yeah.
I think that more money, I can get off on that all day long, but there just really needs to be a lot more reform.
Yeah.
A lot more services, at the very beginning, and a lot more services provided for families.
Yeah.
A lot more resources, because a lot of people, it's ignorance and poverty,
Yeah.
ignorance, poverty, and addiction.
Yeah.
And that's what you deal with a lot,
I
and
just
it's
watched
sad.
that movie, that documentary Heroin, which was filmed up in, well, now I can't remember, but somewhere up north. And they had such an opioid crisis. And now it's fentanyl.
It's terrible.
Never leaves
And
me like, it's a very good.
I had a
big
client,
town.
I was a defense attorney, I had a beautiful girl. She had really white skin, really pretty, like, and red hair, green eyes, beautiful. She came into my office to her and she got busted for drugs. She looked, this is okay. And then she disappeared for a while. We had an open warrant because she didn't show up to court. She went back into my office and she looked, she'd been a UT student.
Oh.
And I'm like looking at her, and so then she was working at Palazzo, strip club up here. And I'm like, you still stripping? I mean, defense attorneys like strippers because they pay cash. Like, and she's like, oh, well, I lost my job. I was at Palazzo, then I was at some place by the end, and then she's working on the street.
Oh.
And then she's even too rough, for working at some bar, then she was working on the street. By the time I got done representing her, another time it's a 2-year ordeal, and then she comes to court again. And I'm having to hide her. She's drunk and high. I'm like,
Oh.
my paralegal, I'm like, take her to the bathroom on the second floor, like, just wave at the judge. So, I'm like, my client's sick. And they run her down to another floor. So they're hiding her. I'm getting a reset. And I'm just looking at her, I'm like, hey, you look so bad. Like, what's going on? Please, I know you said don't contact your parents. Can you please give me their information? No. And then finally somebody else contacts me and I get information. This girl, when I met her, had been a UT student that had just started doing drugs, that was now then started stripping. By the time it's done, she's a prostitute, homeless. And at the very end, she ended up going to prison. We finally found her parents. Her parents and her dad just wept. He had her high school picture with him. She was like valedictorian looking girl. And I mean, and I think that her skin being so white, it was so much more obvious because the sores all over her skin
Oh, my
and her leg, she had on jeans and she had like this pus like thing on her leg. And I'm like, and we said we would turn her in, and my paralegal's going, she can get in my car, Heather. I'm like, all right, I'll take her to the jail. She literally had open sores on her legs from that. And, I'm like, that is a godsend maybe. And that's what her dad said. He's like, maybe it's good, prison's good. And we ended up, by the time that she had cat cases, and then before she had cases in Travis. And Travis is usually pretty good to work with getting services. Their mental health courts are better than most. And they'll help you when you call from another county because they've got some good lawyers up there that will help. But yeah, she went to prison, and it was the saddest thing, but it's just drugs.
Did she ever say, like, why was she allowing herself to go from a hopeful young person?
Addiction. It's
Well,
real.
Was
Addiction
it
is
meth
real.
that she was addicted to?
By the end, it was coke at first, it was coke, because you can afford it, like, your Bellagio strippers aren't doing meth, and it just goes, it's just the road.
Yeah.
Snowballs. And then I just can't afford it. It's getting worse. Meth is, crack and cocaine and, getting cut. It's just cut down more and mixed with other substances.
So is Breaking Bad real life in your county?
Yeah, not really. I mean, you have guys making meth, this time explode houses. The other thing is, like, I always want to tell my kids, if you saw the houses that these drugs get cooked in or cut in, like, they're like rats laying next to the bathtub and there's like, they're cooking meth
And
in
you
the
can
bathtub.
smell it, I think.
Yeah, we had an officer that actually had lung damage. They got complaints, and it's like a chemical smell. And he looked in and there was a kid sitting in a high chair in the kitchen. They were cooking meth and the officer broke the door down and got the kid out and got lung damage.
Oh,
The kid had a bunch of lung damage. It's a kid's emergency room.
yeah.
Oh, I was actually read
Let's say thank you.
a book by where Sean Hopwood, Memoirs of a Jailhouse Warrior.
Oh, I'll have to look at that. It sounds like something I would like.
That's another good book.
Thank you
Yeah.
very
So
much.
he went to prison for robbing banks and he became a lawyer and he became very famous. He just represented some